Ascendance of a Bookworm begins with this guy here giving a little girl a drink that knocks her out. I, as a female, immediately tense up, but watch anyway because they told me it was a wholesome slice of life, and that's what I'm here to watch. Anyway, it turns out that this is a magical world, and this dude, named Ferdinand, is going to use this diadem thingy to look into the girl's memories because she's a freak of nature and poses a degree of threat to the people of that world. She's still a little kid, but she's very knowledgeable for her age, has invented incredible things out of the blue, and most importantly, just showed off how much mana she has in a crazy display of magic. Myne had confessed before that she got all her ideas from a dream world she could never go back to, and while Ferdinand had reluctantly accepted that explanation then, given how much mana she has and just how many people now know, it is urgent that he figure out her motivations and once and for all make sure she's not a spy or something bad. What ensues is one of my favorite sequences in the series. He learns that she came not just from another country, but another world entirely. Our isekai'd heroine was once an adult woman and is now living in the tiny and frail body of 7-year-old Myne. Like I said, this final episode in the series was one of my favorites, but later I learned that the creators skipped a bunch of stuff, like a bunch. But you know what? It was satisfying to me. I had not read the source material, so it was great. And knowing that there was more certainly made me go read the source material. So if you've watched the anime, but haven't read the light novels, this video is for you. Again, like in my previous video, there will be no spoilers past season 1 and 2 content. The final chapter of the light novel, which is part 2 volume 2, or chapter 131 if you're reading the web novel, ends with Myne making herself comfortable on her side and falling asleep after taking the potion, even going so far as telling Ferdinand goodnight. The last thing she hears is Ferdinand say that he is using a magic tool that searches through the memories of witnesses and suspected criminals to ensure that they are telling no falsehoods. This tool is reserved for grave crimes which require the Archduke himself to intervene. He says he will have to use it to see the world of dreams she told him about. The next chapter in the web novel, or the epilogue in the light novel, is told entirely from Ferdinand's point of view. Ferdinand looks down upon the sleeping Myne and thinks that she's a mysterious child. In the web novel, which is in the first-person point of view, Ferdinand admits to himself that what he's about to do is not pleasant and he feels regretful about it. But he'll have to do it for the sake of the city, to make sure that Myne is not a danger to it. He picks up the hair stick that fell from her hand and thinks about how mysterious she is with all her accomplishments and strange knowledge. If it had just been a matter of curiosity, the Archduke would never have allowed Ferdinand to use the magical tool. However, Myne had shown an incredible amount of magical power. In fact, we learn that Myne has more mana than even the freaking Archduke, and that power would continue to grow until she became an adult. So it was still impossible to know just how powerful she'd become. A commoner girl with her knowledge and mana would be sure to spark a war between nobles and lords for possession of her. Additionally, though he had told the Knight Order that she was under his protection, it was only a matter of time before others learned of her and would want to steal her from the city. He's not sure he alone can protect her when it came down to it. In fact, he's not even sure if she's even worth protecting at this point, because there's so much about her that he still doesn't know. That is why the Archduke told him to use the magic tool to judge her worth and determine whether she meant the city any harm. Ferdinand was sure that Myne would never forgive him for what he was about to do. He believed that this would cause her to be on her guard against him, maybe even avoid him from then on, which was a shame for him because of all the people in the temple, Myne was the only person that Ferdinand never had to be cautious around, and so he was very comfortable around her. There's a line in the web novel that I like a lot, when he thinks how Myne will never trust him again. I didn't know until I lost it, but apparently I have become surprisingly fond of Myne. I found it funny how in the source material, to activate the device, the gems and the magic tools had to be in contact, so he was kneeling on the ground all up in her face. I don't think he was like that all the time though. That would have been exhausting, and besides later on in the series, it is revealed that you can pour mana without being in physical contact. In the source material, he makes a note of how mana works and how the body naturally repels other people's mana. It's pretty interesting stuff. But anyway, he is actually surprised Myne poses next to no resistance to his mana, which is helpful for his purposes, but he feels the urge to reprimand her for not putting up more of a metaphorical fight and resisting. When he calls to her and tells her what they're gonna do, she's like, okay, without showing fear or disgust, which again makes him feel that urge to reprimand her for not putting up more of a resistance. He once again asks her, is this really okay? Like, do you not mind? And she's like, well, it's not great, but if you're going to do this and it will help clear any suspicions you have of me, and it will help me to not be executed for some non-existent treason, then you're actually doing me a favor by investigating before coming to a conclusion, right? When he tells her that they can go anywhere in her memory, she gets super excited. And Ferdinand, who is synced to her emotions as well as her memories, is actually afraid of being dragged around by her emotions, and he is determined to get this over with quickly. First stop is Myne's beloved library. They stand in front of a large building unlike any other Ferdinand had ever seen before, a place that was definitely not the lower city. Ferdinand noticed that there was no bad smell in the air, no filth in the streets, and the ground was beautifully paved. He concluded that they were in some noble's quarter. Myne skips with joy to the doors, and they open before her, without her actually touching them or putting in magic. Ferdinand is surprised because Myne had told him there was no magic in her world. Turns out her world runs on different principles, in this particular case, electricity. Ferdinand knows that they're definitely in another world and asks where they are. Japan, Myne replies. I used to live here until I was buried in an avalanche of books and died, then woke up as Myne. Ferdinand is incredulous. How can one die from being buried in books? And are there even enough books in the world to crush a person to death? Yet when he sees how many books are in Myne's local library, he can see, yep, it's possible. There were far more books than any other place he'd ever seen, even more than at the Royal Library. In fact, the whole place is impressive to him, and he figures that it must have cost an insane amount of money to build a library like that one. He can feel how Myne wants to cry out of happiness, and he finally understands why, given that she loves books so much, she cried after she found the temple's reading room. He is amazed at how books are accessible to all kinds of people, and they are not even chained to the bookshelves. He is shocked beyond words when he sees women in knee-length dresses and people with frayed clothing just having free access to the books. Myne tells him that people can dress as they like in her world. She chooses a book and sits down to read it, and gets so engrossed that when Ferdinand asks a question, she had forgotten he was even there, which is actually so on brand for Myne. I like how he says in his thoughts, "This fool is unbelievable. She's completely absorbed in her world, despite the fact that I am watching." Ferdinand asks her to show him different kinds of books. He is fascinated with the detailed and vivid illustrations. He really likes those, but Myne shuts the book before he can see more. He then asks to see the books for kids that she kept talking about, and she shows him an illustrated children's book. It's Cinderella, and he thinks, that's not how people look. No humans have eyes that big in their faces. But then again, he thinks maybe in her world people like that do exist. And so he orders her to make more illustrated books with lots of bright colors like that one. And she's like, well, I wish I could, but 1, ink is expensive and not easy to make, and 2, I can't find colorful ink, so I have to make it. Now, if only I could get what I needed from here. Which takes them into an art supply store where he is blown away by all the products he sees there. She says she likes the art supply stores but likes bookstores even more. And with that, she takes him to a bookstore. Ferdinand is fed up with her books and asks that she take him to where she received her education. The next thing he sees is a classic Japanese classroom, a memory from her high school days. She explains the Japanese education system, which includes a wide variety of subjects from music to sports, math, and languages, and explains that everyone knows how to read and do math, and she wants to introduce that kind of education to the orphanage. When he asks what for, she says that she wants more literate people, not only to read, but to write books for her. Ferdinand finally sees that she truly is devoted to making and reading books. There's no dark or ulterior motive to it. Ferdinand remarks on the beauty of her school, and she's like, yeah, it's a fairly new building. Myne picked that school because it had the biggest library around. And Ferdinand found himself standing in yet another library. This time he really is fed up with her libraries and with her book sniffing, so he orders her outside for him to see more of their surroundings. Myne shows him cars and planes, all of which move without the need of mana. When he asks to see more devices that run without mana, she takes him to a house to see more electronics. It is a pleasant place, and the use of delicate lace for curtains means that they are in a very rich noble's house. But he notices that Myne's heartbeat is racing, and there are all kinds of conflicting emotions. When he asks what's wrong, she replies, "This is my home." The chapter ends here in the web novel and continues on in the next. In the light novel, the 2 chapters, this one and the next, are just one single epilogue. Now, Ferdinand is going to learn about Myne's home. Myne is close to tears, and the onslaught of emotion is almost too much for Ferdinand. He forces himself to focus once more and asks about the trinkets on the shelves. Myne shows him a shelf full of arts and crafts and explains that her mom used to drag her around to learn this or that new hobby. Her mom usually gave up or lost interest halfway through the projects though, so Myne, as Urano, finished things for her. There were dolls and coasters, baskets, tote bags, and hair accessories. As she says this, she remembers her mother, and Ferdinand sees a black-haired woman he assumes is Myne's previous mother. As Myne talks about her mother's irrepressible need to pursue all kinds of hobbies, and how, thanks to her mom, Myne was able to learn things that have helped her in her new life, Myne cries, and Ferdinand, synced as he is with Myne, feels the love that Myne has for her mom, feelings which he, estranged from his family as he is, does not understand. Myne runs to the restroom to wipe away her tears, and shows Ferdinand running water, which is pretty amazing to him too. Speaking of running water, Ferdinand finds himself in the bath. He realizes that she is naked under the water and shouts at her, something like, "Where is your maidenly shame?" Ferdinand can't look away because he is in her mind, and Myne is like, "Whatever, I have no shame. I had to give that up when I became a little kid, and my dad, who was a stranger to me, dressed me." Ferdinand is like, "I am not your father." And Myne is like, "Well, back then, neither was he to me. And anyway, why do you care? Surely you don't think anything of a little kid like me." And she just continues on enjoying her bath. Thankfully, there's nothing showing. The bathwater obscures everything anyway, and she says that the bath will improve her mood. Ferdinand notes that given the ease of using showers, it's not surprising she doesn't need attendants. Yet she uses sweet-smelling products that are far superior to even those used by royalty. Additionally, when she dries her hair, he sees she owns an expensive mirror. Once again, Ferdinand comes to the conclusion that in her past life, Myne was the daughter of a very high-class noble. When she ties her hair back with a hair tie, he asks about the hair sticks, and she replies that in her world, they're only used with certain outfits, like those used in coming-of-age ceremonies. She takes him to see one such ceremony, and he sees people dressed in traditional Japanese robes. He notes that there are girls wearing very intricate hair sticks, and the robes have many beautiful designs. She explains the dyeing technique and wonders how she and Benno can market the technique. So, Ferdinand concludes, there are a large quantity of things Myne knows, and each would bring in quite a lot of money. She is quite valuable. They go back to the house. This time they are in the kitchen. She shows him the stove and how it works, which amazes him, because the fire is blue and there is no need for mana or wood to keep it going. The fridge is also interesting, but it's nothing he hasn't seen before, as there is a room to keep things cool at the temple. Myne remarks, "I wish I would have known, then I could have invented new dishes." As they talk about food, Myne decides she wants to try some food that she hasn't been able to try since becoming Myne. Next thing Ferdinand knows is he is sitting at the table, and Myne, or rather Urano's mom, is serving them her favorite food. Myne eats the food in front of her with gratitude, swayed by all kinds of emotions from happiness to love and nostalgia. She cries silently. Ferdinand hadn't thought the food looked appetizing or even good, but he actually enjoys it. He describes the food as having a gentle taste full of nostalgia, even though he'd never eaten it himself. All the while, Ferdinand is hit by all these emotions that he's just not familiar with. Myne tells her mom that the food is great, and her mom is like, "Well, that's rare of you to say so. Do you want a new book or something?" And Myne is like, "Well, I always want books, but I just really wanted to say this to you." And you know, this part is really bittersweet, as Myne has the opportunity to speak to her mom and say thank you, and even apologize for not being a good daughter, to the point that she ended up dying at the end. This all culminates with all these feelings hitting Ferdinand hard, and as he can no longer bear it, he ends up cutting their connection. Back in the hidden room, Ferdinand gets up, stands a few feet away, only to collapse to his knees again. Myne's eyes are still closed, so he quickly wipes away his tears before she awakens. When she finally opens her eyes, there are tears in her face, but she still smiles at him and tells him good morning. Ferdinand is stunned when she tells him thank you for using the tool on her. Her memories had begun to fade, she says, but now she remembers things more clearly and tells him that even though it was only in her mind, her being able to eat her mother's food, as well as giving her a proper thank you, helped her a lot. Myne notices that Ferdinand is still emotional over this synchronization, so she tells him she's going to give him a hug. In the original Japanese, she says she's going to give him a gyu, which I think is adorable. The light novel translates it as a big squeeze. Myne hugs him, saying that she has a family to give her squeezes, but he has no one. Unlike the anime, Ferdinand doesn't push her away. He really is wrung out by the storm of emotions, and she herself still seems to be in need of a squeeze, so he just freezes there and lets it happen, which is kinda cute. The chapter ends, like in the anime, with her refusing to take off the magic tool until he promises to use it on her again. He of course refuses, and snatches it off her head. In the end, after seeing inside her memories and judging that there's no evil intent in Myne, he concludes that she is very valuable to Ehrenfest, and they cannot afford to let her get taken by anyone else. He continues thinking, how should I explain this idiot to the Archduke? He realizes that she's incredibly valuable, but she's also very careless and is an easy target for abduction, given that she has no common sense or sense of danger. She would need someone to watch over her and steer her in the right direction, and for that, he says, books would be the best bait. Thus ends this part in the web novel. I really enjoyed reading this and recommend you read it too, because while the anime does a decent job, they obviously couldn't fit everything into it. They would have needed an extra episode or something. What I liked a lot was the fact that this was told entirely from Ferdinand's point of view. Seeing our world from his eyes makes this part really fun to read. Additionally, this shows us several things about Ferdinand. He has quite a few secrets of his own. First, he has enough rank and contacts that allow him to make requests of the Archduke himself. This is a fun little tidbit that you should keep in mind going forward. No spoilers in the comments, please. Next, Ferdinand lives in an environment where he is constantly afraid of walking into a trap or saying the wrong thing, and that thing getting reported to the high priest. That is such a sad and bleak life. No wonder he was willing to put up with Myne's antics. Despite her being a headache, she was still a breath of fresh air, and he didn't need to be on guard when talking to her. He could just be himself. Another fun fact is, I like how the source material hints at his scholarly nature. You can see this by how he was so curious about the principles of electricity, and how things like lights, the gas stove, and the vehicles drew his attention the most, and he wanted to learn how they worked. At this point in the story, we don't know it yet, but, small spoiler, he's something of a mad scientist. Finally, this chapter tells us that he is estranged from his family, and either because of that or because that's how noble families are, he has never experienced the feeling of home or of a loving mother serving you food to the point that the emotions he experienced while being synchronized with Myne's mind caused him to feel absolutely overwhelmed. There's a bunch more to learn about our favorite grumpy hero as the novel continues, and I hope that you go and read the source material. Either the free web novel, or you can purchase the light novel to fully enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and also if you're returning, thank you so much for liking my first video. I'm especially grateful to those first few commenters and those that subscribed. I hope to do another one of these soon. See you later, everybody!